Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. The O-Pipon-Na-Piwin Cree Nation in northern Manitoba has declared a state of emergency following a series of stabbings last weekend. Now, northern leaders are calling on the federal and provincial governments to help with the violence before it gets worse. With more, here's T.R. Wheatley.
We demand more than immediate responses.
Unemotional Chief Ducharme speaks outside a meeting about child welfare in downtown Winnipeg with other female chiefs offering her a hand in support. Her community, O-Pipon-Na-Piwin Cree Nation, is under a state of emergency after two separate stabbings early Saturday morning.
Immediate thinking was, we have to protect our people, our children, and immediate lockdown was in place.
It lasted 36 hours and has since been lifted. Now a curfew remains in effect from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. until after September long weekend.
These bandit solutions, they're not long-term.
Ducharme and other chiefs here can't help but to think about the tragic stabbings in James Smith Cree Nation back in 2022. The mass deaths in that community resulted in financial support for mental health services and a healing center, something Ducharme wants in her First Nation.
Our members are ready, to go to treatment and so on, but we don't have the resources right on our lands. It's way in Winnipeg or Thompson, and they have a long waiting list.
Hilda Anderson Perez is a band member who echoes that a healing lodge is essential to healing entire families.
Because if you're continuously taking people out of the community, treatment supports that are not effective and they're coming back to the same environment with no supports or resources. Like, governments have to really take a community-based approach if they truly want to address, the violence in the community.
Chief Angela Levasseur of the neighboring Nisitjuweyasik Cree Nation agrees, but says there are other problems in the north that need to be addressed immediately.
Since 2021, we have seen a 40% increase in violence in MKO nations.
Levasseur says more than half of the 26 First Nations in northern Manitoba only have RCMP presence for a week at a time.
How would people in Winnipeg and Manitoba feel if they did not have police presence for 3 weeks out of the month? There would be anarchy, there would be chaos, and that is what you see in our First Nations communities.
She's also calling on the provincial government to help curb the flow of the illegal sales of alcohol in First Nations.
They purchased a case of what they call Mickeys. They're obviously bootlegging. Where is the regulation?
Regulation, she says, will make a dent in helping curb the violence in the north. As of airtime, there has been no response from the federal or provincial government. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
To Saskatchewan now, and earlier this month, 5 inmates at Pine Grove Correctional Centre started a hunger strike over jail conditions. The Saskatchewan government claims all inmates are taking their trays, but a concerned mother says that's not true. APTN video journalist Rachel May has that story.
The strike began on August 2nd, and one of the key concerns those on the hunger strike were hoping to see addressed was water quality. Allegedly, the water in Pine Grove Correctional Centre is making women in the facility sick when they consume it. We contacted the Ministry of Sask Builds and Procurement, who stated they're unaware of any water quality issues at Pine Grove, but are taking the concerns seriously. The ministry is actioning supplementary water testing as a precautionary measure to confirm the water quality. Government's priority is ensuring the safety and well-being of staff and inmates. The Ministry of Corrections, Policing and Public Safety said the hunger strike or tray refusal began to wind down just 2 days into the strike. The ministry can confirm that on August 2nd, 2024, 5 inmates at PGCC refused their lunch and supper trays. For the following 2 days, all inmates accepted their trays. However, on August 5th, 1 inmate again refused their lunch and supper trays. As of August 6th, all inmates have been accepting their trays. CPPS also said that when an inmate initiates a tray refusal, they also share their concerns or reasons for doing so to staff. A tray refusal ends when an inmate accepts their tray or states they are no longer refusing it. But for Faith Eagle, mother of one of the women, reports that her daughter is still not eating and is only consuming coffee with milk and sugar.
Pine Grove won't dictate hunger strikes anymore. It's not how they want it or how they see it or how they think it's suitable for themselves. The girls are standing up for themselves, taking back their rights and not allowing Pine Grove to dictate them.
Eagle says the 5 girls still fasting are hoping to spur change for all inmates in correctional facilities.
Us as Indigenous people, we're speaking up for all of you, and even for the men in the correctional systems. We hear you, we see you, we know what's going on. Nobody's forgotten. There's no voices that won't be not heard. We'll make sure that you're heard.
Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
A 3-day transformative reconciliation gathering concluded at the River Cree Casino and Resort in the Enoch Cree Nation near Edmonton on Tuesday. The event attracted some big names to learn from each other and to talk about reconciliation. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
People from across Alberta, Canada, and the U.S. were in Enoch Cree Nation the past 3 days. The 4th transformative reconciliation gathering offered guest speakers for young people and for all ages. Joanne Lethbridge-Pompana is from the Red Road Healing Society, a nonprofit that teaches traditional values. She created the gathering to help people find more about themselves and to learn from others.
We don't need a lot of stuff, but we do need to figure out who we are and where we come from and what our relationship is to Creator, how we define Creator, and how we find Creator in each and every one of us. We are medicine for each other. When we hold up that mirror, when we reflect those values, love, courage, honesty, generosity, chastity, silence, respect.
There were workshops ranging in topics from transformative justice to housing initiatives, offering knowledge across all 3 days. Former chief of the Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation, Rod Alexis, spoke about the history of tribal law.
I like these workshops, these appreciations where we could, share with each other how it is. And some of the things that we do are tradition or culture, the things that the gifts that the Creator gave us as First Nation people. We have to maintain that.
Dr. Clifford Cardinal spoke of ways to cleanse the tailings ponds in the oil sands. He says everyone can learn something here.
All this knowledge is here for us. We don't have to look. There are some key speakers here from the Mohawk people, very new information that I learned.
This is Gladys McDonald's second time attending. She says she will be back for the next gathering.
It's unbelievable what the 2 days that I've been here is wow. And I look with who I'm sitting with around the table, and I just think, this light went off. This is what the elders meant when I was growing up. How in the future kind of prepared me into being who I am today at my age, we say elders and that. And this is what we have to teach our children.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Enoch Cree Nation, Alberta.
First Nation in the Yukon has been waiting to fulfill its land use planning rights for over 2 decades. Now the plan is finally in the works. But as Sarah Connors tells us, the First Nation's efforts to have it completed in a timely manner is being slowed down by the territorial government.
The Tronda-Gwitchin First Nation is located in Dawson City, Yukon. For the last 5 years, they've been working with the territorial government to complete the Dawson Regional Land Use Plan. The plan, guaranteed in the First Nation's final agreement, covers almost 40,000 kilometers, or 10% of the Yukon. Once completed, the plan will balance natural resource management, like mineral development, while also protecting Tronda-Gwitchin's rights, title, and interest.
From an Aboriginal perspective, it's protecting the environment, ensuring that we have the ability to harvest resources out of the land.
The Dawson Regional Planning Commission is an independent body of Yukon community members tasked with developing a plan for the region. It provided a recommended plan to both governments in 2022. The governments were then asked to determine whether to accept, reject, or modify the recommended plan. The First Nation submitted its recommendations in April, but says the territory has asked for multiple extensions to submit theirs.
But Yukon so far has not provided their submission, so in essence, the commission is sitting in limbo, and we can't proceed or move this issue.
The First Nation says the government told them one of their holdups is that it's legally obligated to consult with the neighboring White River First Nation.
We shouldn't be held hostage around their duty to consult with White River, and I'm not truly understanding in the legal context why they have that obligation.
In a statement to APTN News, a government spokesperson said, "We will deliver our response to the recommended plan to the Commission once we have completed our consultation with affected Yukon First Nations, including White River First Nation. And we remain committed to a timely process and are investing the time needed to complete a thorough review of the recommended plan, including consideration of all pertinent views and information." But the Tronduk Gwitchin feels the territory isn't taking the matter seriously.
Rather, we see unnecessary and lengthy delays such that we can only assume that this process is not a priority for public government.
The government says it expects to submit its proposed modifications to the Commission this fall. Once the Commission gets them, it can start drafting a final plan. It's not yet clear when that final plan will be released. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
A brand new center for Inuit living in Winnipeg has opened up. We'll take you on a tour after the break. Welcome back. A group of filmmakers in Winnipeg is telling Indigenous stories through an Indigenous lens. They meet to motivate one another as they find ways to turn oral history into feature films. With more, here's T.R. Wheatley.
Take two.
The Winnipeg Indigenous Filmmakers Collective has been around for over a decade. It started as a handful of people hoping to help one another get a break in a tough industry.
We were being put in, circumstances that weren't the greatest.
But in recent years, its director Amanda Kinjerski, who's Saulteaux and Métis, says a surge in funding dollars through arts and culture grants has raised the stakes and its membership to well over 100 people. Now many are leading productions through an Indigenous lens from start to finish.
So that we can make sure there's authenticity, that there's care that's happening in this industry, because there's so much money going to Indigenous stories that people are taking and maybe not thinking about how do we take care of others and make sure we're telling stories in a good way. My goal was 50 for the year, 50 short films for the year, and we're on track.
On this August evening, this group of film enthusiasts are discussing the next big hit. Rachel Bolio's been here since the beginning.
We bring people in to be able to experiment and learn and see what they like, what they're capable of.
They meet monthly to help one another with everything from acting tips to script writing, as well as designing sets to planning and budgeting a film from start to finish.
We're able to tell our stories, and now we're working towards being in charge of what these budgets are going to look like for the films, what the stories are, and making sure we're actually telling them in a good way.
That can have a profound impact on the spirit within us.
Oja Jack is Bolio's first major film. She's directed and produced, and it will soon be seen at festivals.
Okay, so I'm proud that I have the language in there, and I'm also proud that the people that were part of it, 80% filmmakers were Indigenous on set. So having a budget from the Indigenous Screen Office to be able to hire Indigenous filmmakers and Indigenous actors, and just to tell an authentic Indigenous story.
Telling Indigenous stories is also something that 20-year-old Kiera Barrett is passionate about. The Norrie House Cree Nation member found this group on social media.
Everyone was super nice and easy to talk to.
As the only visible Indigenous person in her studies at CMU College of Makeup, Art and Design in Toronto, she was grateful to find this group when she moved to Winnipeg.
Going from no people to there being a whole collective of Indigenous people also doing what I love, it was just exciting, and it was just made me happy and proud, I guess.
Barrett also credits on-the-job training here for helping her become lead makeup artist for a couple of fashion shows. Training that Kinjerski says not only helps build confidence, but helps prepare people like Barrett for the constant change within the industry.
We do traditional storytelling
We do experimental storytelling. We have a film incubator coming up where we're going to do a bunch of one-take Super 8. We're going to do cameraless films.
Experimenting in more ways than one.
Panic! Bingo!
But always mixing a little bit of culture and niche humor every step of the way. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Looks like a great film. Urban Inuit Nonprofit in Winnipeg opened the doors of their new 18,000 square foot space in the city's north end this week. Since opening in 2019, Tunasugit has become a hub for Inuit in Winnipeg, transitioning from northern to city life. Reporter Sierra Bettens takes you on a tour of the new facility.
Tunasugit is the organization Nikki Komak-Sutisak wishes she had when she moved to Winnipeg from Chesterfield Inlet, Nunavut as a child.
Living here in the city of Winnipeg and not really having access to culture and language growing up made it really difficult for me to have my culture and hold up my culture. So if I was going through that, that meant a lot of other Inuit who were living in the city were also going through that.
Decades later, she is the executive director of Tunasugit, a nonprofit that helps Inuit transition to life in the city by accessing services and cultural programming.
We opened our doors May 4th of 2019. We started with one staff member with a board of directors, and today we have about 26 staff, a healthy board of directors, and a beautiful space that we just moved into here.
Tunasugit means welcome in Inuktitut. After 5 years in the community, the organization has expanded from its modest location in the West End to an 18,000 square foot space in the North End. It's a first week of drop-in programming at the new space where country food and community connections await those who walk through their doors. Youth Program Manager Maxine Engu and lead community lounge helper Pudlu are gearing up to host youth programming in the basement.
They'll be doing throat singing, learning how to play Inuit games, art, floor hockey you could play down here. I mean, this space is specifically going to be for the Inuit Youth Program, and all of our community events we usually hold once a month.
Some elements, like the bingo board, will be kept, while the rest of the space will be repurposed.
Our small space, we couldn't have any events there. It was way too small. We were operating out of 3 separate buildings, so we often had to rent community space. But so that's a big game changer now that we're here. We have our own space. We don't have to pay for other space.
According to the 2021 census, just under 500 Inuit live in Winnipeg. However, thousands travel to the city every year to access services like medical care and educational opportunities. Oftentimes, when Inuit move to Winnipeg, Komak-Sutisak says they encounter barriers right away.
Not able to retrieve identification and not being able to get that form of identification, then there were just a ripple effect into so many other barriers that are associated with that, not being able to find housing, not being able to, go apply for various social programs, job searches.
In the new space, Inuit can access laundry services, sewing stations, a donation closet, and computers to connect to services.
We have computers set up for community members. They can do job search, they can look for housing, other programs they might be searching for.
As they expand programming in the new facility, Komak-Sutisak says they're also advocating for more policy changes aimed at removing barriers for Inuit in Winnipeg.
Not only are we a non-for-profit organization supporting our community, but we're in the background also changing legislation and policy to include Inuit, which is exactly what it is that we need to do to support our community.
Once renovations are complete, she says they plan to host their official grand opening in the new space in September. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A new graphic novel looks at the impact of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. More on that coming up after the break. A new novel hopes to show that there isn't one right way to grieve after a family member goes missing. The story Little Moons explores the emotions that can come up while waiting for answers. Sav Jones has sat down with author Jen Storm to find out more.
When a loved one goes missing, your heart searches for them everywhere.
I had lost somebody in an MMIW scenario, and I felt a lot of those things. Like I felt like there was a presence. I would feel like lights flickering, and you're just looking for that connection also, I think. So I really wanted to write about that experience.
Upcoming graphic novel Little Moons explores the different ways grief can affect the relatives of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Ojibwe author Jen Storm says though the story isn't based on her personal experience, it's a subject that's all too common within the Indigenous community.
Grief was important to me because I think that was a really hard thing for me to experience, and I know it's hard for other families to experience that have to deal with MMIW because not everyone's found, right? And so there's this like weird grief that you go through, I think. When you're expecting the worst news, you kind of already know, but you don't have the answers or the mourning or the body or whatever it is.
Through vivid colors and thought-provoking illustrations by Ryan Howe and Alice R.L., Little Moons follows 13-year-old Rihanna while she watches her immediate family deal with the disappearance of her older sister, Chelsea. Rihanna feels abandoned by her mother, who leaves their reserve to live in the city when emotions get too difficult to handle.
If you lost a daughter, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know what would go through your mind or how you would cope, or maybe that's the best she could do. Yeah. So it's like, I kind of wanted that to be in there because I know people don't react ideally, they react humanly.
Despite the pain, there's also hope found within Little Moons. Rihanna finds strength and comfort in connecting with spiritual practices.
It was really important to me for the main character to really have that connection to her community and her traditions and to find comforts, and then also have that parallel of her mother who felt she had to run away from it.
Storm says the title was inspired by her own son's experience of seeing her late childhood friend.
My son was, I think, 2, not even, and he was in his crib, and I went up to him and he was saying, I saw Auntie, and he's never met her. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean you met Auntie? And he's like, she was here, like, and he kept, like, he was insisting. And I just kind of played along, and I was just like, well, what did Auntie look like then? And he was like, she looked like Little Moons. So that was like, oh.
Storm hopes that Little Moons can be a resource for any person, young or old, who is struggling with losing a loved one. Readers can find it on store shelves when it comes out September 3rd. Sav Jones, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Looks really good. Thanks, Sav. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this weekend. You can always stay up to date with the latest by visiting our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy McGuitch, thanks for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.